Hello, I'm Gopar and welcome back to what hopefully is the last video in this how to build your own web framework series. So let's go ahead and get started. So for this video, the only thing that we're gonna add is what is left to do, and that is middleware. So let's go ahead and get started. First off, I'm gonna import some libraries. I believe I'm gonna use all these UUID and then import logging. We'll use it in a bit. All right, cool. So at the end of the file, we're going to go ahead and create some two middlewares. And we shall do, I'll show you what it does. RequestID Middleware. Yes, that's what I want. Def pre-process request self.request. And I'll explain what it does after I'm done. ID equals string.uu ID. We're going to create a new ID. UUID, that UUID, it's beautiful, and then we're gonna return that request. And then for post process, we are gonna do self status headers body and request as well, and we are just actually gonna return all that because we're not gonna do anything with them. Oh, what the heck? Okay, pretty sure I copied it. There we go. So we're just going to return all that. Cool. So for this middleware that we're creating is a RequestID middleware, which as you might have guessed is we are assigning a special ID to each and every single request that is coming in. So this is similar to whenever you go to a web page and an error happens. Sometimes it might say, hey, call this number and give this ID. So maybe you've seen that, maybe you haven't. But this is one way of doing it, is that they do it via middleware. They say, hey, whenever a new request come in, let's assign it a new ID, and then whatever happens, we either log that it successfully passed or that it failed. And when it fails, it gives an error message on the web page and shows you that ID so that you can reference it. That way it's easier for teams to go back and just query for that ID and see the life cycle of the request. So this is a simple example, but let's create another one, yeah? And the other one is for logging. Let's see. Actually, before I go that, let me explain these two methods. So the pre-process request is at the beginning of the lifecycle before the request is given to the web framework, and then post-process is after the web framework has done its things with the request. So middleware usually takes place in one of those two places, and sometimes both. So let's go ahead and create another one. Logging middleware, yes, that's what I want. And then for this one, we're actually gonna have some type of initializer, constructor, initializer, or whatever language you're coming from, but this is Python, so we usually call it constructor logging.getLogger. And we're just gonna do the log is itself. So I'm just setting up the logger, and I'm gonna do, oops, not set level to system. Oh no, wait, that's the wrong one. Logging.info. And I'm going to say handler equals stream handler sys.std out. I'll explain everything in a second. I just want to make sure I'm doing it right. And then pre-process request is self.request, and then I'm going to return request because we're not going to do anything in the pre-processing stage. The post-process, we are going to do something. We're going to status headers body request. We are simply going to log, but we are also going to return this. Oops, wrong buffer, and return. But before we return, we're actually going to do self.logger.info, and then we're going to do request.id completed with status of status. So yeah, we're just going to log it. Booyah. So okay, cool. Let me quickly explain what's going on. So I already explained what happened in the RequestID middleware. I'm going to explain what's happening here in the logging middleware. So we create a logger. We say, hey, this is the name, we're going to do it. This is the logging info that we're setting at the level. You can set different levels. I'm just setting it for info. And then I'm saying I'm creating a handler, a stream handler, which just says, hey, I'm going to print out to standard out, which is just means that we're going to be able to see it. It's not going to send it to a file or anything. Normally you would send it to a file. or a third party or things like that. But for right now, this is demo purposes, so we're just going to say, hey, just stream it out to standard output. Don't even trip. Don't even worry. Sometimes, there's a lot of projects where you don't even do this anymore. You just add some third party in, like Sentry or some other logging web service, and pretty much you just add those logging statements to that library. You configure it, import it, and then use it. So you don't even have to worry about this. But for now, this is a very trivial example. Okay. So that's for when the object is created. For when pre-processing, before the web framework handles the request, there's nothing really anything us to do, so we're just not going to really do anything. But after post-processing, we can say, hey, request ID completed with status. Actually, we can add more logging statements here, but for now, I'm not even going to worry about that. I'm just going to say, hey, the request ID status, the request completed, and this is the request ID. Now, you might be thinking yourself, if you saw this early, hey, you're using request ID, but request ID isn't set until we use the request middleware. And that's a good eye if you caught that. So what happens is that when we create the middlewares, we need to make sure that this one runs first and then this one runs seconds. How do we do that? Well, simple. Since middlewares is just a list, we just have to make the list is organized to the way that we want to. And if you've used web frameworks like Django, you might see this as well, where it says, hey, make sure this middleware comes first or last or whatever. That's essentially the same principle here. Okay, so enough talking. Let's demo it out. But before we demo it, we have to actually add it. So we do request the middleware. So that one goes first, and then logging middleware. Cool. I think that is it. Not sure if there's anything else. Why is it erroring out? Expecting. Oh, because that's wrong place. This is where it's supposed to go. Cool. All right, cool. I think that's the only thing that needs to happen in this place. So we added the middleware, those two, and then let me go over here and explain it. So once the lifecycle starts, as you can see, we create the request. If it doesn't, we just. If there's no content type or something goes wrong, we just return something, an error, say, hey, these are the valid content types. And then right here. So for middleware and middlewares, we're going to run the pre-process request. So whatever happens before we process it. So after all this, the web framework does its thing. We get the response. We get the headers. And it's like, all right, middleware, is there anything we need to do after the request has been handled? If so, update. And we actually need to pass in the request here. Then we're going to do a request. So it's a good thing I came over here, and then it says like, nope, okay, after everything's done, any manipulation of anything, so we're going to pass in the status and the header. So you can manipulate the status, headers, body, whatever in the request. You can even add a middleware that changes the status to always negative something that you want, headers to something, body to pizza. I mean, you can make a body to pizza. You can make a middleware that always returns pizza as the body or something like that. It's up to you. Middlewares, there's a million examples or reasons to add middleware, but yeah. Okay, so I believe this should run completely fine. So let's go ahead and run it. Moment of truth. Oh, cool. It actually worked first try. I'm amazed. If you've seen the other videos, there's usually something wrong. But let's go ahead and run this. Oops. So, okay, so I'm going to run this, and it's actually, let me change the port, 9009 cars. All right, cool. So if we press return, let's see what happens. So we get a 201 right here, create it. So this was already made. So everything's working as example. But if we go over here, you can see request some gobbledygook completed with status of 201 created. So it actually works. So our middleware work, we created a special ID for each request. So if we run it again, it should be something new. Actually, let's just run it. So ta-da. And it should always be something new. Highly unlikely, high chance of collision because of how UUID is, if I remember correctly. So I can do also just get. So whatever request, incoming request now will always have a special ID. And with thanks to the logging middleware, we'll actually use that to do something. So yeah, as you can see, this is a pretty trivial example of adding middleware or how it works. But hopefully this is the end of the video. It's a lot shorter than the other ones. But yeah, because we mostly finished everything. So yes, this is essentially the life cycle of a web framework or a request. And this is how you create a small little do-it-yourself web framework. Hopefully you guys learned something. You can now use this framework with something like, well, you just saw that we were using it with GUnicorn. So GUnicorn, a lot of companies use GUnicorn for production. You can use it with UWSGI, ModWSGI, I believe, with Nginx, whatever you want, as long as there's some WSGI interoperability with the web server. As long as the web server can communicate with WSGI, it'll be able to communicate with our little web framework. But yeah, let me know what you think of the series. If you want me to go over other topics in web development or other things that you want to dive into, have a deep dive into any topics, I'm always interested in doing more things. But yeah, that is it. Thanks. Take care, y'all.